From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Please join me in welcoming Kathleen Glasgow.
Thank you so much for coming to see me today, and I'd like to thank the National Book Festival and the Library of Congress for putting on this great event and inviting me. I want to also thank the city of Washington, D.C., because without Washington, D.C., I literally would not exist. My parents met when they were at Georgetown. So that's my tie to the city. I used to visit here a lot. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we used to come up a lot in the 70s and go see some of their old college friends and go to what they called rent parties. Does anybody know what a rent party is or was? And it's when you can't pay your rent, so you throw a big party and your friends all come and they give you like a couple of bucks at the door towards your rent. And my siblings and I probably should not have been going to those parties, but it was the 70s and I remember it as being like a lot of fun. And maybe that's partly what made me a writer. A lot of people ask me how I came to write Girl in Pieces, which is the story of Charlie Davis, who uses self-harm to cope with her intense emotional trauma. Does everybody here know what self-harm is? I'm not going to explain it to you, because I don't know who's in the audience. But it is the act of hurting yourself to release emotional pain. And I often tell people that I gave Charlie my scars, but I gave her her own story too. And the story in this book takes her from Minnesota to Tucson, Arizona, where she learns how to take care of herself. She's homeless when the book begins. She's briefly in a hospital. She's kicked out because she doesn't have insurance. And then she's put on the bus by her mother to go to Tucson to stay with her old college friend, or her old high school friend, Mikey. And it's there that she falls in with a group of people at a coffee house that she ends up working at, and sort of learns what kind of life she wants to lead. And the book is filled with some very hard topics. And as I've been traveling the States this year, talking to people about the book, I've met a lot of people who've read the book and said, you know, I don't know if that really qualifies as a young adult novel. There's addiction in the book, there's abuse, there's assault. And they say, you know, I'm not really sure I want my kids reading that. And I respect that. But my answer to that is, don't you remember high school and growing up and how hard it could be? And my answer to that is, you know, suicide is the #1 cause of death for teenagers. Why wouldn't you let them read a book about it so they could learn about it and process their feelings if they had those thoughts, or if they knew somebody in their school who had committed suicide? How can you tell a 15-year-old girl who suffered assault that she's old enough to go through it, but she's not old enough to read a book about it so that she can process her feelings? Books like these need to be on the shelf, and they need to be talked about, because kids who suffer this stuff need a way to process their feelings and to heal. And they need to know, above all, that they're not alone. So I say that I wrote this story for a girl that I met on the bus when I was leaving my job at the University of Minnesota, and she had fresh scars on her arm, and I didn't say anything to her. And I always think, I should have talked to her, and I should have told her, I used to be where you are right now, and you're not alone, and I understand, and you can talk to me, and there is hope. But I didn't. Instead, I went home and I thought about it, and I wrote a book to that girl. And ever since I wrote this book, I get letters from kids. I got this letter from a girl named Lily, and Lily said, I'm Lily, and I attend school in Illinois. And in 2017, I will be 13 and a half. And Lily goes on to say, In the first grade, I started to notice the bullying that was happening to me. I got called heavy, fat, and I felt stupid because it was horrible and it made me feel dumb. And later in the letter, she tells me that sixth grade was when the big black depression cloud started to form, and I have never come out of that. And the first time that Lily tried to commit suicide, she was in the first grade, and she tried to drink hair gel. And she says in the letter, "I didn't know how to do it. It was gross. Don't try it. It tastes bad." And we might think that's kind of funny, but she was in the first grade. And now she's 13 and a half. She doesn't have any other book that talks to her about how she feels except for this book. And at the end of the letter, she tells me she's on her third hospitalization, but her mom got her this book because she didn't have anywhere else to turn, and her mom had no way to talk to her about what was going on, and they read this book together, and now they're in counseling together. And that's why difficult books that might make you, as a parent or an educator or a librarian, feel a little bit uncomfortable, that's why books like these actually matter to kids, because they want to talk about that stuff that is making them feel alone and uncomfortable and marginalized. When I was younger, this is the story of how I became a writer, and it has to do with my mother who went to Georgetown. There were 4 other kids in my family, and they were much older than I was, and they were all in school. And my mother was rightfully tired after doing all that mothering and getting them off to school and giving them cereal and whatnot. And so as soon as they left, she would, light up a cigarette, get on the couch, and open a book. And she was a voracious reader. And I realized very early on that if I wanted my mother to pay attention to me, I was going to have to learn to read. So I taught myself to read when I was 3 by watching Sesame Street, which I'm still an advocate of. I love that show. And my mother looked at me one day and said, "Okay, it's on." And from that day on, every day, we went down to the Central Public Library in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, and we spent hours there till my brothers and sisters came home. And she let me pick out whatever book I wanted to pick out. She didn't care if it was meant for adults or if it was meant for kids. She just wanted me to read. And we talked about reading together all the time. And I read things that I probably shouldn't have been reading, like maybe some books that were like a little too sexy for a 10-year-old. But I like to think that those, gave me an education as well. When we moved to Tucson, my mother took a job in an office, and I was really lonely, and it was a huge difference from being in Pennsylvania. And I didn't have any friends, and I was 11, so it was right about that age where things start to happen for you. But every weekend, my mother, all 90 pounds and 5 feet of her, would lug home this giant IBM Selectric typewriter from her office and set it up on the dresser in her bedroom and let me write my stories all weekend. Every weekend, she did that. And then during the week, she would let me read them aloud to her. And she would always say, "That's great. I love that. How did you come up with that?" And if you can be that person for a kid, where you have no judgment, where you let them be who they want to be, you can literally save their life. I would not have made it through my adolescence if I didn't have an outlet like writing, and if I didn't have the support that I had from my mother. So if you can be that person who brings that IBM Selectric typewriter to a kid in your life, I hope that you decide to be that person, because it really matters. And if you're an educator or a librarian who can put that book on a shelf for a kid who maybe doesn't talk a lot, or seems like they maybe don't have a place to sleep that's consistent every night, you should be that person. One of the best conversations I ever had with a librarian was when I said, "Oh, I'm really kind of sad now because when I was growing up, you went to check out your books and you had to check them out with the librarian, and you could talk, and it had like the little cardboard thing inside that they would stamp." And I said, "It's kind of sad now because everything is self-checkout." And she said, "Actually, it's really good that it's self-checkout, because now people and kids can go pick out the books that they want to pick out without feeling embarrassed about bringing it up to the counter. And they said, and also, this was a school librarian, she said, I can tell which kids are checking out which book multiple times. And then I know that they need that book, and they need other books like them, and I know to order more copies. And sometimes at the end of the year, if I see a kid has checked out a book 13 times, I just tell them to take it home, and I'll order another copy. So it's actually a really good thing that you can check out books privately now as kids. And she said, it's a good way for me to keep track of what's going on in their lives as well, because I see what they're reading, and I know what we should be concerned about in our school. I'm going to read a brief section of Girl in Pieces, if that's okay, and it's the beginning of the book. And the book is told not in chapters, it's told in 3 sections, and partly that's to reflect Charlie's psychological makeup at the beginning of the book, having been on the street for so long. And then as the book goes on, the sections get longer and a little bit more expansive as she learns to start to feel comfortable in the world. Like a baby harp seal, I'm all white. My forearms are thickly bandaged and heavy as clubs. My thighs are wrapped tightly too. White gauze peeks out from the shorts Nurse Ava pulled from the lost and found box behind the nurse's station. Like an orphan, I came here with no clothes. Like an orphan, I was wrapped in a bedsheet and left on the lawn of Regent's Hospital in the freezing sleet and snow, blood seeping from the flowered sheet. The security guard who found me was bathed in menthol cigarettes and the flat stink of machine coffee. There was a curly forest of white hair inside his nostrils. He said, "Holy Mother of God, girl, what's been done to you?" My mother didn't come to claim me. But I remember the stars that night. They were like salt against the sky, like someone spilled the shaker against very dark cloth. That mattered to me, their accidental beauty, the last thing I thought I might see before I died on the cold, wet grass. The girls here, they try to get me to talk. They want to know, "What's your story, Morning Glory? Tell me your tale, snail." I hear their stories every day in group, at lunch, in crafts, at breakfast, at dinner, on and on. These words that spill from them, black memories, they can't stop. Their stories are eating them alive, turning them inside out. They can't stop talking. I cut all my words out. My heart was too full of them. I room with Louisa. Louisa is older, and her hair is like a red and gold noisy ocean down her back. There's so much of it, she can't even keep it in with braids or buns or scrunchies. Her hair smells like strawberries. She smells better than any girl I've ever known. I could breathe her in forever. My first night here, when she lifted her blouse to change for bed, in the moment before that crazy hair fell over her body, like a protective cape, I saw them, all of them, and I sucked in my breath hard. She said, "Don't be scared, little one." I wasn't scared. I'd just never seen a girl with skin like mine. So the book I'm working on now is a book about a 16-year-old girl named Tiger Tolliver who lives in a little town outside Tucson, Arizona, and her mother dies unexpectedly. Now, my own mother was sort of the impetus for the story, because when she was 7, her mother died unexpectedly, and her father put my mother and her brother in an orphanage and sent a baby sister to live with relatives in California. And my mother never saw her baby sister again. And she lived in that orphanage for 3 years until she was adopted by a lovely couple that she considered her parents for the rest of her life. But I often think about the memories that my mother would relate to me about her time in the orphanage, or the things that she remembered of her own mother and her father and of growing up. And I just started thinking about the stories that our parents tell us about the way that they used to be before they were parents, and the things that maybe they don't tell us. Because, and I am a parent, I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I'm thinking really hard about these things. What things do you really tell your kids? How much of your past do you want them to know before maybe it might be a little bit too heavy for them to bear? Because my mother telling me about her past and her life in the orphanage was really sad. Maybe, in some ways, that was a little too sad for me to know at that age, because my perception of my mother shifted just a little bit. Like I felt like I needed to almost take care of her in a way, now that I knew this little bit of information about her. So I started thinking about Tiger Tolliver and a girl who loses her mother at the age of 16 and who's never known her father, and how that death might spur her to learn more about her mother, and she might discover things about why her mother was the way she was, maybe like overprotective, things like that. But it's also a story about building family from the ground up, because Tiger discovers that she has an older half-sister who has her own problems, who maybe isn't going to be the best mother or caretaker, but comes out to take care of Tolliver anyway. And the book also examines the role of foster care in our society, and kids who are on the margins, kids whose parents are unable to take care of them because of addiction, which is huge in Arizona. Like the opioid addiction in Tucson alone is just, it's out of control. And almost 42% of the school-age kids in Tucson alone are living in shelters or in their cars because of the ravages of drug addiction. And it's something we really need to start thinking about. So that's what that book is about in part. And it's also about the concept of motherhood and mothering, and about a girl who's very lonely, who is going to undergo an incredible transformation through the death of her mother. And part of it is based on how I felt when my own mother passed away. You become a different person. So it's a book about grief, told from Tiger Tolliver's 16-year-old point of view. I would love to take questions at this point if anyone has any. I will answer any question. I can't really see back there.
How did you get started as an author? What was the impetus? What was the ideal and thinking at the time?
Do you mean like more or less how I decided to send something out to see if it would get published? Well, I liked writing in school a lot, and I never thought that I would be a published author, and I got a degree in poetry because I never really thought about writing fiction or, big, long books. I liked writing my short snippets of poetry because that appealed to my darker nature. And when I started writing this book, I started writing it using that poetic voice. And it took me 9 years to write this book and 13 drafts because I had 2 kids. I lost my mother and my sister, so I stopped writing for about a year after that, which I also want to say, if you're a creative person, things take as long as they take. Sometimes life happens. People will die. You will have kids. Wait it out and then go back to work when you're ready. Don't pressure yourself. That's the most important thing you need to know. Whatever it is, whatever story you're trying to tell, it can wait. People will still be there to read it. You need to take care of yourself. I met a literary agent and an editor at the Taos Writers Conference, which I would recommend if you're thinking about being a writer. And that was the first time that I'd really had some interest in the story. I didn't have any friends who were writing fiction at that time. I'd been out of school for quite some time, but they were really interested in it. And I spent a lot of time with one agent revising the book in many, many different ways until I found a different agent, and actually she ended up selling it quite quickly, I think within a week. So it got very, very crazy. But in terms of the process of writing the book and taking 9 years, you know, in the beginning of writing this book, Charlie had a twin, and everything that happens in this book had happened before that story actually started. And after a couple of years, I realized, you know, I'm not telling the story I really want to tell because it's making me uncomfortable. And so gradually, you lose things in the process of writing. I was like, I don't need Charlie's twin. She has this best friend who's way too supportive. The best friend goes. Another best friend comes in who's maybe a little bit more competitive with Charlie. Charlie had an okay family in early drafts. I eventually got rid of her family because I needed Charlie to be as alone as possible. If readers, especially the teen readers that I wanted to reach, were going to believe in her story because they feel completely alone, and I needed to have Charlie be completely alone. And it was through that whole process that the story changed. Other things happened. There's a house early in the book that Charlie ends up at in the Minnesota winter where the kids are being trafficked for sex. And that house was based on a house that I lived near a couple blocks away from in a neighborhood in St. Paul, Minnesota that's called Frogtown. And I lived in Frogtown for 13 years. And it's one of the poorest neighborhoods in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And it turned out that there was a house a couple of blocks from me, and they were keeping Hmong girls there and selling them through the back pages of magazines. And the Hmong girls were afraid to go back home because of the shame. And so they stayed there. And I never forgot about that story and the fact that none of us in the neighborhood knew what was going on. Winters are long and cold in Minnesota. They last like 7 months. Nobody leaves their house except to go to work and come back home. We had no idea what was going on in that house. And I thought about that for a long time. I never forgot those girls feeling alone and being afraid to go home or wanting to run away somewhere else, but they couldn't because it was too cold. And so I put part of that in this book, and that's a way that real life sometimes creeps into your fiction.
Yes, can you explain the cover of the book, the concept, and what it means, and including with your name, is that like erased and then, so the title, but also your name looks like something's going on there. Thank you.
So Charlie Davis, very early on, you learn in the book that one of the things that gives her hope and helps her feel better is art. And she draws comics of her friends, and she also does charcoal sketches. And throughout the book, she goes to a library that really exists in Tucson, Arizona. All the places in the book in Tucson are real. She goes to the downtown John Valdez Library, and she takes out books on the old masters, and she tries to copy them. And when your editor sends you a cover copy of your book, they always say things like, it's fabulous, and we love it, and your job is really to say, yeah, that's great. But, you know, I will say honestly that I had some hesitations on this cover because, you know, those are cut marks, right? And I was like, I don't want to upset people. But then the longer that I looked at it, the more I liked it because the smudges are Charlie's charcoal on the paper. And if you buy the book in a bookstore, you'll feel the texture of the paper, which feels like sketch paper. So they did a really nice job. So that's Charlie's charcoal with the smudges, and then they cut pieces going through the name. And I think they did a fabulous job. And it actually won a couple of design awards, which I think is great. But the cover also serves as a way for readers to know exactly what that book is about. I don't think you could look at that book and think that that's going to be a roller coaster ride. A reader who needs that book is going to look at that book and say, okay, this book is going to talk about something painful, and I'm going to read that because I need to read that. It tells girls who cut that this is a book that they need. It tells adults who have scars like me, I'm going to read about that because that's going to talk about my experience in the world. And so I think that they did they had just a brilliant idea when they came up with that cover. And I asked my agent, when they do the paperback, do you think they'll change the cover? And she said, no, it's an iconic cover now. It's the pink book. They're never going to change that cover. And I have come to love that cover a lot.
Hi. I came here late, and I didn't read your book, and I apologize.
Are you here for David Baldacci?
No,
He'll be
I'm
here soon.
Actually, no, I'm here for you. My daughter was like, whoa, I've heard of that book. I really want to go visit. And so, I'm a mother of a teenage daughter who's 14 and a mother of a soon-to-be teenage daughter who's 11. And I found your personal story very compelling about how long it takes, and it takes what it takes in order to be creative. But, and also the bit that you just read from your book and the story that you just told about the girls in Minnesota. So my question for you is, as a mother who's anticipating, growing girls, what do you recommend for those of us who have teenage daughters in this very complicated world?
One, don't forget what you felt like as a teenage girl, ever. Don't forget that. You need that. Two, listen. Whatever they have to say, listen. If they call you at 2 a.m. and they ask for a ride home, just go get them. Don't ask questions. Don't lecture. Just go get them. You remember exactly how hard it was. And the thing is that you're trying to think, I want to protect you, so you don't feel those feelings that I felt. That's impossible. All you can do is stay by their side. That's it. I wrote this book partly because I want people to start talking about why our girls are trying to make themselves smaller. More than 1 million girls harm themselves every year. Why are they trying to make themselves disappear? Why? Why are we letting them? The best thing that I think that you can do, if you really want to be active, is to go to your daughter's school, talk to her counselor or a teacher that she likes, and start a girls' club after school or during school hours. I visited a girls' empowerment group at Tucson High School, and this was the only place that these girls felt like they could get support, sitting in this little space in the band room at 9:30 a.m. and talking about their feelings with the school counselor. Literally, I think that group was like saving some of the lives of those girls. They were in bad spots. I felt honored to be sitting there with them sharing their stories with me because it's bad. And I don't mean to get political on everybody, but the person that's in the White House, that's bad. That person is not a friend to women. And for girls to see that you can get elected to that, is so painful and damaging. And for girls to try to tell people when they've been assaulted and not be listened to is so damaging. And all I can tell you is that you need to listen. Try to get girls together so that they can talk about their feelings in a safe and supportive atmosphere. And just never forget that even though you want their life to be different than the life that maybe you led as a teenager, you can't control that. All you can do is stick by her side and be her parent and her friend and her listener. One of the things that I have thought a lot about this year, particularly because I will probably always write difficult books about difficult subjects, is the responsibility of the young adult author for teenagers who read your books. And if you're going to talk about this stuff, it's your responsibility to put hope in that book. There has to be a glimmer of hope at the end of the story. A door has to be cracked and light has to come through, or you haven't done your job. You can read as many books marketed to adults as you want, and the story can end with ennui or looking at the sunset, and you don't know what happens to the characters. It might turn out to be a little dark. But for teenagers who have a whole possibility of a life in front of them, you absolutely must have hope. Hope has to be in your book. And I give Charlie that at the end. And it's a hope that she works for on her own through trial and error, because not everybody has access to therapists or has a supportive school counselor or a supportive family group that they can talk to. Sometimes you have to do it on your own, and sometimes you slip and fall, but you have to learn that that's okay too. And I think that that's one of the things that I have loved the most about the response to this book, is the fact that people feel like, and teenagers feel like their story has been told, and that they have hope now, because I gave this character some hope at the end of the book. Do we have any more questions?
I just wanted to thank you for the Writer's Almanac.
Oh.
It got me through my first years of teaching. It aired right before I went into the building, and I would sit and wait, drink my hot chocolate, and listen to the poems, and it would set me for my day, and I've used them many times in the classroom.
Right.
And in particular, remember one about describing a dog with cancer. And my mother had died of cancer about a year prior to that, and just crying in my car before work in the morning. Anyway, it's wonderful, and I'm glad that it's still out there and it still exists. And do you know Garrison Keillor personally?
I do. He's it's actually a really great character writing tool, doing the research for these, because he'll send you the topics. I've been doing it for a couple years now, and he'll send you the topics over email, and it's literary biography and history, and you have to write them, you have to research them like super quickly and send him this material, but you also have to read it out loud kind of in his voice, because then he's going to go record it, so you don't really have a lot of room for like editing. And so I read something, and then I have to say to myself in the corner of my room, surrounded by Legos, "Today's the birthday of Ludwig van Beethoven, whose ode to joy," and you kind of have to do it in his voice. And he's a terribly nice man, and I hope that he keeps doing it for a long time. And there are 3 of us who do research for him, so it's literally, I learn something new like literally every day, so I like it.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi.
I have a technical question.
Okay. Is it about the microphone? Because I can't answer
No,
that.
it's very nice.
Okay.
My question is, you seem to be one of the few authors that does not have a Wikipedia page.
I don't. Are you offering? I don't know how to do that.
Can you explain your choice?
It's not my choice. I don't know who sets that up.
On my way here, I did a lot of research.
You can do it.
So-
Make sure that you say that I'm 6'2" and I'm willowy and blonde.
Well, I don't know how the other authors got it done.
I think anybody can just go on and make a page for anybody, can't they? I don't know. There's only so much I can do. I have these kids, and they want me to take care of them, and I have to read to them. They're getting older.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good question. I'll tell my agent, Julie, I don't have a Wikipedia page, and I don't. Oh, okay. Okay.
So our 15-year-old read the book, and she kept on telling my husband and I, "You have to read this book," and it's so gripping. It's amazing. And I'm really surprised that the room is not overflowing. I
think this is a pretty good crowd.
Yeah, but I really expected. And my question is, it might sound a bit weird, but I really feel like there's a movie in the book, if the movie is a good one.
Yeah.
Have you thought about it? Has anybody approached you?
I haven't been approached, but I would feel fine if there was a movie. I think that would be great. Like, I'm not one of those writers who's like, "Oh, movie, my precious gem." I think that would be awesome. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would watch that movie. I think that could be a good movie. I would be totally excited. I like all this stuff that comes along with being an author. I love getting these letters. I like people coming up to me in the bookstore and saying, "Are you the person who wrote that book on that shelf? I wrote that book." I like meeting people. Movie sounds like a good brass ring to me. I'll take it. So that would be great. And so you said your husband read this book too?
Yeah, we're reading it together.
I think that's really great. I think that brings up a good point, that if there are books that you're a little worried about your teenagers reading, read them together. It might help you as much as it helps them, and it gives you something to talk about. Like your teenagers, they're not just people that you forget about and say, "Go watch TV by yourself," and you go to school every day for 8 hours, and I see you at night for 35 minutes. read the book with them, just like you watch a movie or talk about a TV show, because that can be a great way to open up a conversation that maybe before you were a little afraid, you were afraid of how you would start it. And it can create a lot of, I think, empathy and communication between parents and their kids reading together. I love reading with my kids. We end up talking about some really great stuff, so. I'm sorry there's not a bigger crowd, but I like it. Some people are here for David Baldacci, and they're just like, what am I watching? This is not what I came for. So, you know. Oh,
Am I allowed a second question?
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to know a little bit more about what happened for you when you did connect with a literary agent, and
Like when I connected?
yeah, how that all played out, and just sort of what the process was, and yeah.
Well, the process, you know, if you want to find an agent, one of the ways you can do it is go to a writer's conference and pay extra to have a little private manuscript consultation, and they'll look at like 20 pages and offer you advice. And sometimes, in my case, with that agent, she offered to represent me. I didn't know anything about that process at the time. I was like, oh, this sounds great. Of course, love me. I might never get an agent again. And I signed with her, but it turned out in the end, her vision for the book was not my vision for the book. She really wanted to steer the book in a more adult direction. And I didn't want to go there because I had a young character and I was a young person. And so we parted ways like very amicably. And then I simply got on my computer and I looked up agents and I saw what books they had represented that might be similar to mine. And I will tell you no lie, one of the reasons that I sent a query to my agent, Julie Stevenson, was because she looked really nice in her picture. She had a good bio, but looking at her, I just felt this connection like, I bet she would like my book. And I cannot explain it. But she did. She really championed this book. She got it right away. She sent me notes on that book and how she would edit it and where she was going to send it and what her vision was for it before I even signed with her. So if you're looking for an agent, make sure that you find someone who's enthusiastic about that process and about your book. First and foremost, they should really love that book and they should want to work with you. You know, don't find someone maybe who has like a whole stable of writers, because maybe you'll feel, you know, lost amid all those writers. I found somebody who was committed to me and I made the right decision.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a great year. Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, what would you say your favorite book or author would be and why?
When I was growing up or right now?
Both.
So when I was growing up, the first book that I truly loved, that I felt like was speaking to me, was Catcher in the Rye. And it was my mother's old paperback from 1952, where Holden Caulfield is wearing what they call in the book, you know, his people-killing hat. But he was depressed and suicidal, and I hadn't read that in a book yet. And I was like, my God, that's me. And as I read that book as an adult, I can see that there are problems with Holden's character, but as a teenager, I love that book, and I still love it, and I reread it every year. I'm also wearing my A Wrinkle in Time t-shirt because I love that book, and I am so looking forward to seeing the movie, aren't you? Oprah is in it. That's right. I would like Oprah to play Charlie Davis. I would watch that. Some of the books that I've recently read that I really liked were The First Time She Drowned by Carrie Clutter, which is a young adult novel, Girls in the Moon by Janet McNally, which is a young adult novel about a girl whose mother was an indie pop musician in the 90s. And I love that story. It's about finding yourself and finding out who your parents are and forging a life for yourself.
Okay, well, I'm one of those people who came for the next talk, so I just got here.
Oh, hi, thanks for coming, thanks for staying.
Okay.
I hope it was informative.
Yes.
You can see my book cover.
It's who's the artist, but actually the other question is, you know, you might have answered this already in your talk, so.
Yeah.
One is, how do you overcome, like, when you don't get inspiration anymore, like you run dry?
Yeah.
Materially? And the second question I have is, do you ever like ponder how people will interpret, what you're saying, and how do you handle it when people misinterpret what you wrote in your email feedbacks or snail mail feedbacks?
Oh.
Thank you.
You mean like if I respond to a person who writes me a letter?
No, like let's say like you're writing and you have one interpretation.
Oh.
But like, have you ever had people like either misunderstand you or give like a totally different interpretation that you really liked? And could you describe some of those? Thank you.
Well, first, I think that, everybody who reads a book is going to come away with different things about that book. And you could have like 10 people who've read the same book, and all 10 of them are going to have a different opinion of it, and all 10 of them are going to find something in that book that really touched them that might be different from the other 10 people. So that's the reason I love novels and writing, is because there isn't just one yes or no. And in the new book that I'm working on right now, Tiger Tolliver really loves to read, but she doesn't call herself book smart. She just likes the act of reading. But she doesn't like sitting in her English lit class, because every time she really wants to talk about something that happens in the book, the teacher says, well, actually, no, because they're more interested in telling her about literary terms and what she should be thinking and how to dissect the book, and not about how a book makes you feel. And I'm more in that camp. I like how a book makes you feel. I like thinking about craft, too. But if someone comes up with a different interpretation of my book, I'm not going to argue with them. I think that's interesting. I would probably say, well, where'd you see that? Where did you find that? And as for inspiration, and I will end because I only have 1 minute, and I know like you're waiting for David Baldacci, and he's probably here, and he's like, get her off. But it's that, so last night, they gave this really great award to Dennis Johnson, who's a great fiction writer, who passed away, right? And I was telling my agent that he visited this program that I used to work for at the University of Minnesota. And one of the graduate students asked him, so, like, what do you do? Like, if you don't know what to write and you're like, you have writer's block. And he was like, and I don't know if this is true, what he said, or if he just, said it. I like to think it's true. He was a really funny person in person. I really liked meeting him. He said, I watch a lot of TV. I got this cabin, and I watch a lot of TV. And then my wife comes over to me, and she says, we need a new roof. And I get up and turn off the TV, and I go write. And I sell a book. And I go on tour, and I do some teaching gigs, and then I come back, and I turn the TV back on. And then a couple of years later, she says, we got to pay the electric bill. And I get up and I turn off the TV. And I go write something. And I sell it. And you know what? That's inspiration. Sometimes you just get up and turn off the TV and put your butt in the seat, turn off your iPhone, your iPad, your whatever, and write the story. That's it. Thank you so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.